Create with Fran Sidney. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. We are on episode 78, I think. I keep getting it wrong every week. So we're getting towards 100. I'm very excited. And today we're going to have a very special guest all the way from the States. His name is Payne, and we will be talking about something very, very particular. It's about self-reliance, but not quite. It's about resilience. It's about getting this self-reliance in a different way. How? When you get chronic disease and it doesn't go away. So we can't wait to hear from Kevin and all his experiences and how he survived with 32 years of multiple sclerosis. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Well, thank you so much for that enthusiastic welcome, Franz. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I used to do that because, I like to have a guest that has so much to offer, and you have so much to tell us. I don't know how we're going to do this in 30 minutes, but hey, we're going to try. So tell us a little bit what happened in your life that got you to where you are now. Just a little bit so that we trying to introduce what was the presenting problem, what was going on in your life, and how did you react to it. It's all yours now.
There are probably three things that your audience would be interested to know about me. First, my doctorates in sociology and psychology. I spent 15 years as a professor, and I've spent a decade as a tech entrepreneur building models that predict human behavior. Second thing people will probably find useful to know is that I've lived with multiple sclerosis since 1989. And like many with MS, my condition went misdiagnosed and undiagnosed for a number of years. So as my symptoms got more pronounced and more varied, I finally got a correct diagnosis in 2006. And my condition, as with most of us with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, tends to come and go. It never completely goes away, but I'm always dealing with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic cognitive fogginess, issues with my legs, and numbness and paresthesia and weird feelings, and then another laundry list of about 30 other symptoms that come and go. And the third thing that people might find interesting is that when I really got to the worst part of my condition, and my brain wasn't working, my body wasn't working, my wife and kids decided that this wasn't a journey they could continue with me, and I was alone. I decided to give myself one more chance to begin rebuilding a life that I cared about living. And to do that, I returned to skydiving because I'd had a handful of jumps in the 90s. I wanted to be a skydiver from the time I was a kid, but I had a very long break in there, about 20 years. And so in 2019, I decided that even with my wonky central nervous system, I was going to figure out a way to become a legitimate skydiver. And now I've logged over 600 jumps, and I'm still going.
Well, that's amazing, Kevin. I mean, I do have friends that have MS, and there are issues, and I can see they become worse, and sometimes you can't do much about them, and we just have to, your life gives you lemon, and you make lemonade sort of thing, and you're a good example on that. And so you realized straight away that you wanted to have a meaningful life. Although life was being redefined and your identity was completely rewritten by this disease, that you, of course, you didn't want it, it just came. And what about your mental position there? Did you experience anything like, this is a rhetorical question, stress, anxiety, depression, feeling low? What was your mental situation? Of course, because this podcast is really much about how your mind reacts to things and what to do about it. So tell us about your first period when you first experienced the worsening symptoms and you realized you could no longer live the lifestyle that you had before.
Well, I had two issues going on. One was I had a new set of symptoms emerge about a decade ago, and it was, even though I didn't realize it at the time because my then neurologist kind of mishandled this. It was a massive right frontal temporal lesion, and so I was dealing with a lot of higher cognitive issues, with a lot of processing social signals, stamping memories, emotional regulation, those sorts of things. So I had brain issues that were causing some serious cognitive and emotional problems. Then I also, because I didn't understand what was going on, and I'm a brain guy and I need my brain to do what I'm doing every day, I got really profoundly depressed. And I came to the point where I didn't know whether I could chart a course from where my life currently was to a life that I was interested in living. And I really did come close to giving up. I really am not exaggerating when I said I was going to give myself one more chance to do something to try to reclaim something that gave my life agency and something that gave me some sense of control or influence over my own life. Because one of the most terrifying things about MS and many chronic health conditions is that the thing we come to fear most is sandwiched into our bodies with us, and we can't get away. And most of our primal strategies for dealing with fear are about getting some kind of distance. And you can't. So you have to have a different set of strategies to deal with something that is awful that you can't get away from. And as somebody with all the education about people that you can imagine, got a PhD in people, been teaching about people and studying people and researching people for all my adult life, it was really difficult for me, especially because I had to admit that even though I had the abstract knowledge about it, I had to go back to the beginning and build a completely new set of practical skills for putting this into action in my own life. Mm. And that was really tough.
There was. What was, so did you develop something like a special diet or some types of food that you wanted to choose, or did you have special supplements to help you? What was your physical part of this recovery, mental recovery, let's say?
Well, certainly I was except for one brief time in my life, as an adult, I have been generally, other than the MS, reasonably fit and have eaten right and others. I mean, there was one time in the 90s where, before I was ever diagnosed, I had an exacerbation, I got depressed, I gained 120 pounds over the course of 2 years, and then lost it over the course of the next 2 years. And so I've been pretty much this size since then. But I don't eat fast food. I boycotted McDonald's in 1989. I stopped eating pretty much any other kind of fast food 20 years ago. And my general philosophy about nutrition is eat food that remembers where it came from, so as little processing as possible. So natural foods, eat a good variety, lots of vegetables and fruits, and eat mindfully. So don't just ever sit and absent-mindedly snack while I'm watching TV. If I'm going to eat, then eating is what I'm doing. And focus on that and eat that. I'm a big fan of the Okinawan idea of Hara Hachi Bu, which is this idea of eat till you're 8 parts full. And we didn't know why this worked until a couple of decades ago, and we realized that if you eat till you feel like you are mostly full, and then stop, have a pause for 15, 20, 30 minutes, your stomach signals will catch up to your brain, and you will realize you are already full. So, I tend to eat that way. There are a fair number of vitamins, supplements that I will take, and that kind of changes depending on how my condition is doing at a particular time. But yes, nutrition, I always start out the morning with a protein shake and my veggie sludge, which is what I call my smoothie. And then I meditate, and I lift weights and row. And that's the way I always start my day. So it's really crucial. Oh, and taking the dog out.
Mm-hmm. So you do a lot of things. I did want to add a note about the satiation, and a word that I can never pronounce in English, right? Perfect Italian here. When we eat, the hypothalamus takes 20 minutes to tell us if we are full or not. So if we eat really fast, we will eat a lot more. But if we eat slowly and mindfully, we will not overeat, because the hypothalamus will take that time to tell us, okay, you're there. So it's a very good and wise thing, not only with chronic disease and MS, but generally speaking, not to go and eat without thinking, because you might just eat without really realizing you didn't need all that. And I think when you're mindful, you are more likely to listen to your body, understand how it wants to be treated. And in MS, fibromyalgia, I think it's really important to know, because you are constructing a new identity, aren't you? You're doing something new. You are no longer the person that was there before, and you are creating all these skills. And you told me something that, aside from this now, the fast food, I kind of understand, because, it's processed food. You're going to make your cells out of processed food. What kind of processed cells are you going to make? So you want to be as healthy as possible. And melatonin, you said about that, because we know it rebuilds myelin. But I wanted to know a little bit about this. You have a different mindset from most people, because you are more a researcher, and you did research about this. There was almost an addiction to this. So tell me a little bit more about what did you research and what happened?
Well, of course, my specialty is research methodology, and I'm not only the geeky scientist who does research. I'm the scientist other scientists come to help design the research projects so that they are done in a valid, reliable way. So for me, when I was diagnosed, it was a relief more than anything else. I mean, it's a pretty awful diagnosis to get, but I had been living with weirdness for so long that it was a relief to get a name for it. And then I had a target that I could work toward. So I know, based on, there are a couple of really great longitudinal studies with worldwide sample sizes. WHO has done one, there's another one, and it indicates that when you look at health outcomes, 2/3 of all our health outcomes are due to cognitive, behavioral, and social factors. So that is massive. And I knew that I wasn't the right kind of doctor to figure out a cure for MS, and I'm not going to wait around for researchers to come up with a cure, because we probably won't get it in my lifetime. We may, and I'd be delighted, but I'm not going to wait for it. But I knew, as a social and behavioral scientist, that I could alter the trajectory of my cognition and my emotion and my relationships and my environment in ways that help me better adapt to the real limitations that MS puts in front of me, and still let me make progress toward the things that make my life valuable. So I started studying myself. I would collect dozens and dozens and dozens of variables on myself every single day, and I began running models and trying to predict and understand what my leading indicators were for oh, I'm going to have an exacerbation, or I'm not going to feel well the next day, etc. And my whole purpose was to give myself the best understanding of the condition that I can possibly have, so that I can proactively adapt.
Yeah, that is something that most people can't do in such a detailed way, because we are not all researchers. But it certainly helped you, so you know where you are, and you have a meaningful life, and you're able to do things that a lot of MS people will never be able to do, like going up in the sky and then fly down. Tell me a little bit more about this skydiving. What happens? How does it work? Because you said you can't really quite feel your legs in the way everyone else does. And tell me a little bit more. I'm very excited about hearing about this flying thing.
Sure. So I had wanted to be a skydiver from the time I was a kid in the 70s. I started doing the training the first time in the 90s. Got a handful of jumps in while I was working on my doctorate. A lot of life got in the way. My health came to the point where I gave up on the possibility of ever being able to get back to it. But finally, in 2019, when I really had, hit bottom in all of those things, and everything was a shambles, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And what I did understand was that I had gotten really bad about some aspects of my self-care. So I was still eating and exercising and meditating, doing that kind of stuff. But I hadn't done anything just for myself in well over a decade. And I knew I needed to do that. And I knew that I needed to rebuild myself. I needed to go back to a beginner's mindset. And I needed to fail at something and be more humble in the world, and really acknowledge where all of my capabilities were at that moment, so that I could effectively work on building myself back up in ways that were going to be possible for me. And so when I looked around at my life, at the thing that I could do just for myself, it was, I want to go back and become a legitimate skydiver. And that meant getting all the licenses and logging hundreds and hundreds of jumps, because you got to get past 500 jumps to be a serious skydiver. That's where you get all the licensing done, and you're eligible for professional ratings and things like that. I got my coach rating along the way. But, as you intimated, it's a serious challenge for me, because amongst the things that I deal with my MS, I generally don't feel my legs below my knees. And when your legs are out of kilter in free fall, you begin spinning and tumbling, and it looks really scary really fast. So when I went back to learning to skydive, I started all over, because it had been 20 years. And I went up, and I didn't tell the people at the drop zone at first that I had multiple sclerosis, because I didn't want them to say, oh, you should just take up bowling instead. And later on, I found out that I was indeed correct, and they would have said that if I would have let them know to begin with. So I went up on a few jumps, and I demonstrated that I could be safe. Because I remembered what the experience was like. It wasn't new to me. And I demonstrated that I could get to my heading, and I could pull on time, and I could safely land myself. And then we were a few jumps in, and normally it takes 25 jumps to get your first license in skydiving, a license. And I was a handful of jumps in, and you go up with instructors, and then they check off stuff that you have to do during the skydive, and you do a debrief after each jump. So we were sitting there in front of the hangar right after this jump, and my instructor came and sat in front of me. Remember, she's a very experienced skydiver with thousands of jumps and lots of ratings, and she kind of looked at me after this jump and said, "That was the most terrifying skydive I've ever experienced." She said, "What's going on with your legs?" So I explained to her that I couldn't feel my legs below my knees. And she kind of looked at me funny and said, "What, did you injure yourself?" And I said, "No," and I explained the MS. So by this time, I was part of the community, and they knew I could do it safe. And so we think of one another as skydivers as sky family. And it's a very close relationship that you develop because you're facing a death-defying activity together. And so they worked with me, and it took a lot of extra work on the ground and a lot of extra work in the wind tunnel so that I could actually have somebody, an instructor right there, holding my legs, saying, "This is exactly what it needs to feel like." And even though I couldn't feel my lower legs or the wind on my legs, I learned to feel the tension in the tendons behind my knees so that I understood where my legs were and what they were doing by the feeling I could get there. Just like I learned how to stand up a landing, not because I felt my feet touch the ground, but because I could feel the pressure at my knees. And so most people take 25 jumps to get that A license. It took me 47. But then in 2019, I logged about 140 jumps, got my A and my B license. In 2020, I said I'm going to have a more serious goal. I'm going to jump better than one jump a day for the entire year. And so in 2020, I logged 370 jumps. While most of the world was sleeping, I was flying through the sky. And that meant I was able to cross 500 jumps and get my coach rating, and really become a legit skydiver. Am I ever going to be a great skydiver? No, I'm not a sky god. I'm a middle-aged guy with a neurodegenerative condition. However, I'm safe. I'm growing and learning all the time, and I can do it well enough that I can help other people learn as well. And those were all really important goals for me, because when I went back, I didn't know whether I had any of this in me at all.
That's amazing. And I really like this description. You're out there and all you can feel this tension, and now you're going to do this jump correctly, otherwise you have no idea, and you can be really out of control, right? So self-care is an important thing, and also being just called and say, okay, this is happening, I can't do anything, the bus is going to run over me now, so I have to do something about it. I can't just say, oh, I don't want it, or I'm going to be a victim for the rest of my life. And we only have just a few minutes left, so I would like you to share, first of all, any tips that you have for my readers, for my audience. So in the form of, if you have a chronic disease, what can you do? Or how could you prepare for something like that if you know that yours is going to be a problem that never goes away, even if it's not a disease. And then after that, I want you to share what you do about this to help the world. But first, let's go with tips. I don't know if you have 1, 2, or 3, so it's up to you.
Oh gosh, I've got really an infinite number, but let's just take a couple that are really easy and really powerful to put into action in your life. And the first thing is, so often when we live with a chronic condition or under any kind of persistent distress, we start to second guess ourselves. And we all have these conversations that go in our minds that we're often not very nice or very positive to ourselves. And we can't get away with that. We can't get away from this nasty person that is in our minds with us. And so what I want people to think about is that everything you know about building a good relationship with another person, how to treat them kindly and respect and all that, also applies to how you treat yourself. And you have to practice to become kinder with yourself. And it does take practice. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to be kinder to myself, and then expect everything to just be hunky-dory all of a sudden. You have got to understand that you're going to fail at being kinder to yourself, because that's an edge. And at the edge, we fail until we succeed. And then we may succeed once, but then we're going to fail again, and it's going to take a while before we become consistent and push that edge a little bit further out. So don't be your own worst enemy. And understand that there is part of you that thinks it has very good reason to be that, and that it doesn't think that it is harming you. It's being critical of you because it thinks that's the only way to push you to improve your life. And it doesn't know any better, because it's part of our inner cave child. It's part of our primal brain that doesn't understand the big picture. So be more patient with yourself. Practice being kinder to yourself. And you will be amazed at the space that opens up in your life for you to start growing and learning and being able to not just push yourself to your edges, but providing a place that's a home for yourself to come back to and rest and relax and recover and sleep and nourish and do all those things that we too often do not emphasize.
That's great. Great advice. Self-care, self-love, not in the form of selfishness, because some people feel guilty, but really understanding if we are to love others, we are to love ourselves as well and take care of ourselves. Why should we not give this to ourselves, and instead we run and run until we are exhausted and we try everything? Was this, I know that you have, that's the thing, you have so many things you can say, but I know that you have lots of advice that you put together in presentation, you give seminars, you wrote books, you have a podcast. Tell us about what you do so people can find out more information about your work to help others.
Well, I've devoted my life to trying to develop and test the body of knowledge that no one gave me when I needed it. When I was diagnosed, when I was a caregiver to a wife with advanced cancer, and I knew that medically there's not a solution, but there's those social and behavioral and environmental things that we can use to improve our quality of life. So what I do is everything is called Your Life Lived Well. And people can go to yourlifelivedwell.co and they can find out about the book and the podcast and the seminars and all of the other stuff that I do. But it's all about helping people diagnosed, loved ones and caregivers, and medical health and wellness professionals who really are trained in an acute care model and don't necessarily have the tools to provide this kind of support. And what I do is try to fill in the blanks. And so not look at it as just a medical problem with a medical solution, but as a quality of life issue. And how do we improve quality of life using the things that we do have some kind of influence over? Mindset, behaviors, relationships, environment, etc. And that also in turn improves the health that we can experience as well, even if we have real limitations.
Yes, that is amazing. So you have quite an array of tools to help people. And thinking about it now, it's been 32 years since all this adventure began. A lot of things went wrong and a lot of things went right. So if you were to go back to the beginning, in the beginning of that journey, what would you give to yourself as a one suggestion? What would you tell yourself?
I think I'd probably This is an exercise I don't spend a lot of time on because it's futile. But in all seriousness, I would give myself the same advice that I just gave everybody else. Be kinder, be more patient. And I don't usually frame it as self-love, because you were exactly right when you said we tend to frame that in the most shallow kind of sense. That's why I usually say be kinder to yourself, because that has more the connotations that I'm interested in. That's being patient and being forgiving. And that's the important thing. So I think I would probably just tell myself that or don't marry redheads. That's a whole different issue.
And that's fine, and that's a brilliant message that really sums up all your attitude towards this. So despite the fact that a chronic disease happens, or maybe we have accidents or really bad situations in the home, sometimes the situation for a variety of reasons cannot get better and we are out of control. But even if we cannot control what's going on outside of us, we have a lot of control of what happens inside ourselves by changing our mindset and perception. And so I'm very thankful to have spent 30 minutes here talking about how you overcame this. You still have MS, but you're having probably a much richer life than you would have had before, because you were just working and getting tired, and it was it. And now you're doing so much stuff and you're touching the lives of many people. So I'm very thankful, Kevin, for your visit here to what's the name of our show? Create. I forgot. It must be a MS coming. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope that our readers and listeners, because we also publish in writing, will be eager to get in touch with you, maybe if you want to ask you questions or buy some products that you make. So I will be putting some links below so people can reach you. And so again, thanks for being here, and thank you everyone for being with us and being very patient with all the little things that happen when you're doing a live recording. And so next time, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I have lined up 4 or 5 people, and one called Lindsay I'm recording with next week. We'll be talking about something very similar. She had a life with a very good job in the city, money, career, all perfect, brilliant house, brilliant family, and she was deeply unhappy. And then she said, I'm going to have to cut this off, and she moved into the woods in a wooden shed with her family and started to home educate the kids. Because she said, that's not the life I want. I have to do something now. So people change their life sometimes, right? We're not always supposed to be on the little train track and go very straight, in the straight and narrow path, right? So again, thank you everyone, and I will be talking to you next week. Take care. You've listened to Create with Fran Sidney.